Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name I'm down here. It's Steve. Welcome. I have some things to cover. So we'll obviously be going over the Week 16 wide receiver rankings in this video. Plenty to talk about. So let's get to the main announcement here is going to be schedule. Obviously, NFL schedule is starting to get funky now, and that impacts things. And at the end of the day, what I've kind of determined between trying to make personal Christmas time available happen, as well as make being available for fantasy football purposes available, is that I think with the schedule, a lot of very customized, unique situations will be coming up with, more games spread across the potential of you being in a situation where you just need a guy to get you 6 points. You can't risk a guy totally busting, burning, and only having like 2 points on your roster because your opponent's had a bad week up to that point. All those things can happen, and I think we just need to be on our toes all week. So I'm going to be quite available for the next 2 weeks as much as possible. Just looking ahead, normally on Thursdays, I go live prior to kickoff at like 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'll be available again at that same time. So we're normal this week, Thursday. Then Friday, usually I don't go live. I think we're going to go live Friday if possible. I am doing a lot of baking of Christmas goodies on Friday, and I have no clue exactly how long that's going to take me, how exhausting that will be. So regardless of whether I end up streaming on Friday or not, I will be available for sure Saturday morning prior to kickoff. There's 2 games this Saturday, and then Saturday night like normal, a little bit later than normal after the Pittsburgh versus Baltimore game, or as that game's wrapping up. I'll repeat, I guess, through some of next week's schedule again in the future, but that's pretty much what it's looking like. Basically, just going to be trying to go most days at some point, be going live, streaming, having rankings available, looking at rankings, going through them with you guys as well, getting some input as we shift things around, as I will very well might not have my normal projections to help guide the rankings as well. So with that out of the way, I think let's just get right into this, right? I don't think there's anything else that's as important as these rankings right now that I can announce. Welcome all new people to the channel. Hope you stick around. If you don't, if you don't like NFL draft stuff, I will be turning the tune to real NFL draft stuff soon after this season is over here, the fantasy season. And if you don't like that stuff, just turn the notifications off and then turn them back on come after the NFL draft, come like May time period. June, really, to be safe. Or not to be safe, but June. So, first tier here, you can see it up on the screen. My wide receiver 1 is Puka, 2, Nico, 3, Justin Jefferson, 4, Ja'Marr Chase, 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and 6, A.J. Brown. These are your studs, your must-starts. I had to hopefully a lot of you listen to me, convince you guys to start A.J. Brown, because for some reason, and I know the reasons, but y'all are crazy, and we're trying to sit A.J. Brown for some stupid people. So Ja'Marr Chase, I had ranked at first, number 1 this week. However, with the announcement of Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, I no longer think that I don't have a whole lot of faith in Dorian Thompson-Robinson I don't think he's really an NFL caliber quarterback so much as he's a project that I don't think will ever, we'll see. I don't want to be rude, but I don't have a whole lot of faith in him, even against the Cincinnati defense. So I think Cincinnati ends up relying on the running back a lot in this game, and that might come to the detriment of one of Ja'Marr Chase or T. Higgins. I just don't think there's going to be room for both of them in the passing game. We'll see. Hopefully there is, but that is a little bit of a concern this week. And with that, speaking of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I am going to introduce you to my first fade of the week. I go through 3 loves, 3 fades during these episodes, and it's just like starts and sits. So my first fade, are going to be the Cleveland wide receivers. They're not going to be in this video. I have like 90 wide receivers ranked. We're going to go through some 40-something of them or something like that. None of them are going to make that top area. I'm not touching them with a 10-foot pole, as I said. I don't trust DTR as a quarterback. So that's going to bring us on to this second tier. This tier goes from my wide receiver 7, CeeDee Lamb, all the way down to my wide receiver 11. After CeeDee Lamb, we've got Davante Adams, T. Higgins, Malik Neighbors, Mike Evans. We're already getting into some questionable territory with these guys for one reason or another, but also these guys have earned enough of our trust for the most part. I mean, Mike Evans still obviously up and down. Malik Neighbors, quarterback situation isn't great, but also he's still going to be a love of mine. And part of the reason here is that I'm trying to persuade you to play him and I'm higher than him than the experts. So I'm just, getting the word out there here from Malik Neighbors. And what it is that I'm doing here, why I love him, is that I'm putting my trust in the workload of Neighbors in a top 5 wide receiver matchup going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Production for receivers begins with getting targeted, and Malik has been targeted the second most of all receivers in the NFL. You call that a safe floor. I don't know what else you would call a safe floor if that's not. His ceiling is limited, but, I mean, come on. He's playing up against the Atlanta Falcons. We can put up another 17-ish point game here, regardless of who the quarterback is. Hopefully, fingers crossed. There's going to be quite a bit of finger crossing with wide receivers this week. It is not the same as last week. Last week, I said to expect fireworks, a lot of scoring across all positions, and we definitely saw it with the wide receivers, and I believe running backs as well. There was quite a bit of scoring. I don't think we're going to have that same kind of week from what I'm seeing with the matchups. And that is going to bring us on to this third tier of mine, which begins with Cooper Kupp at wide receiver 12, followed by Jauan Jennings, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., Tyreek Hill, and Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver 17. I've got these guys highlighted because I just have some notes that I want to cover for them. Jauan Jennings being the first one at wide receiver 13. They're going up against the Miami Dolphins. And I get that I get the weather excuse for the second time in 3 weeks here for Jauan Jennings and his not quite coming through in terms of having him pretty high up in the rankings to start the week. This time, maybe I only get a half of excuse because the second half of that game did not really have bad weather, but maybe the precedent had already been set. I don't know. But I'm hoping that things can be turned back around for Jauan this week. Maybe I'm going to drop him back a few spots, though, as the week goes on. As I look at this, compared to some other guys, the projections might be pushing me, might have pushed me up here a little ways, and how well he's performed in games without Debo and without Jauan Jennings, one or the other. It's still incredibly good, even though he's also had 2 poor games. That's just how good those other games were. So, it's tough. You want that ceiling, and I start to get a question mark here already with Drake London. Maybe that's why I didn't drop Jauan Jennings originally down further here, because I'm going to kind of call on you for help here. I haven't quite made up my mind yet. Maybe I will immediately when this video's over. But I have a little bit of a heated debate in my brain between Drake London and Brian Thomas Jr., and I ended up putting Drake London ahead of Brian Thomas Jr., and originally I was going to ask you, which order do you think they should be, but I'm actually going to change that question to, do you think Drake London should also, or whatever about Jauan Jennings, don't worry about that, I'll take care of that one. Do you think that Drake London should be lowered in the rankings here, and should he only go behind Brian Thomas Jr. and stick ahead of Tyreek Hill, or should we drop him quite a bit? Let me know in the comments, please, on Drake London. And here's the reason. Maybe I should explain myself. So yes, Drake London is in a smash matchup, but it's tough to trust him with how Kirk Cousins has been playing. Another 3-target game, I think, makes a lot of sense. Could be the expectation for this game. That's my concern. The New York Giants, not being able to score. This game looking a lot like Monday night's game with Atlanta in it. And thus Atlanta really not passing a lot. That's always possible, and it does scare me a bit for Drake London. Then we got Brian Thomas Jr. was just on the other hand of that, but Garrett Wilson, I could have made him a love this week going up against the Los Angeles Rams. He still projects well, and frankly, there are quite a few grenades this week at the wide receiver position. Just talked about a couple of them, well, mostly Drake London there, and there's some others, especially one that is going to be coming up at the top of this next tier. And that man that I'm talking about is my wide receiver 18, Terry McLaurin. This tier is followed up by J.S. and Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cortland Sutton, Devonta Smith, and at the bottom of this tier, at wide receiver 22, we've got Jacoby Myers. Terry McLaurin, my first fade of the week, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, and that and lies my concern here. We just saw Washington go up against Philly, and I was concerned about it then. I think I faded Terry McLaurin correctly that week. This was 5 weeks ago, and Terry McLaurin went 1 of 2 targets for 10 yards against Philly, and I can't come up with a great argument as to why to expect a whole lot better from him outside of maybe Washington will have learned, but I also don't necessarily trust the offensive coordinator there in Washington to make adjustments very well, at least. So we'll see. You got to think they'll try something different, and maybe that'll help to get Terry open in some ways, but I don't know. It's pretty tough to find that spot in Philly, and Washington's actually, I believe, more depleted offensively, talent-wise, losing Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler since that game. And my concern going into that was just that they don't have a whole lot of talent to spread the ball around to, where Philly can just lock in on Terry. So I don't know. I think I might end up going lower on Terry than this. Even I've already dropped him down a little ways in my rankings. And what do you guys think on that one? Should we go lower there? Courtland Sutton. Also, a fade of the week for me. This is my last fade because we have the Cleveland Browns fade as well. All the wide receivers for Cleveland. And so for Courtland Sutton, this is less a fade as it is a watch out. He is ranked as the ECR wide receiver 12 on this week, and I feel like that is way too high. He is the wide receiver 26 on the season out of the wide receivers that I have in this pool, which is basically almost all these wide receivers that are projected and a few that are not ranked currently, projected and ranked. So basically any relevant wide receiver, he's the 26th out of all of them. And then you think about Courtland Sutton. It's a guy who I was lower on last week, and I'm going to be lower on him again this week. He goes up against the Chargers, who aren't a horrible matchup, but specifically for Courtland, it's kind of a mixed bag of a matchup here, because part of Courtland's success is that he's kind of the only target in town. He gets a lot of targets, so part of it is volume. He's also been quite efficient, I feel like, but in this game against the Los Angeles Chargers, he's going to have to be efficient. I don't think we can rely on volume so much. The Los Angeles Chargers allow the 11th fewest receptions to the wide receiver position, to give you an idea of where that thought comes from. So I am a little bit concerned about Courtland Sutton's, I would say more so his floor, which actually shows up in these projections. The ceiling, not so afraid of. Hopefully he gets a touchdown and he'll come through for you. But if he doesn't get that touchdown, I think it's going to be tough for him to really have a week that's going to help you to win the week at the very least, and he might end up helping you to lose, I suppose, and that's where I felt strong enough about that possibility that I faded him, compared to, of course, some other guys, and due to where the experts are currently ranking him is a big reason why I'm fading him. I definitely don't hate his play. Just be careful who you're starting him over is all. And then we have is this my final love? My second love of the week in Jakobi Meyers. This is dependent upon if Aiden O'Connell, their quarterback, the starting quarterback, is playing, and he is currently trending to be playing. That is the expectation, and that is how I have him ranked, the Las Vegas wide receivers ranked. If not, then I'm absolutely nervous about Jakobi Meyers. He won't be ranked this high. I am also nervous about the health impacting Jakobi Meyers a little bit, and that's why maybe I'm not a little bit more bold on him this week. But I am willing to take a shot on Jakobi's upside and floor combination in a top 3 wide receiver matchup versus Jacksonville in an important game. And I'll be sure to cross my fingers if I am relying on Jakobi Meyers. But you just look at this projection, it's one of the higher floors up until you get to like the top 5 type of wide receivers. That's just how that volume has helped him in a really good matchup. Another matchup where quite a few targets get thrown against 2 wide receivers against Jacksonville as well, helping to build that floor for him in my projections and how they work out. That's going to bring us on to this next here, wide receivers 23 through 28. We've got Ladd McConkey, Jordan Addison, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, and Khalil Shakir. Not a whole lot to talk about here. Pretty much in agreement with the experts on a lot of these guys. Nothing too crazy. But I do have a love of the week hidden in here, and that is DK Metcalf. I know it's been rough waters, and that's part of the reason why he's going to get pointed out here. And you can see the projections are also concerned about him, even in a really good matchup against Minnesota. Minnesota is still the best wide receiver matchup. And I will say, that being said, given how Minnesota tends to allow points, I do think that JSN is the overall better option in this matchup of the two, the more likely option to pop off. But obviously DK Metcalf could pop off for sure. But even with that said, I'm higher than the ECR on DK Metcalf, the expert consensus ranking, where I've been talking about that with a few other guys. The experts, I think, are a little bit too low on DK Metcalf, and I'm also higher on him than his performance has been on the season. He's been the wide receiver 35 on the season now after these past several weeks haven't gone his way. So that's not been good. That's on a weekly basis, by the way. That's not total points scored. Total points scored is, well, I don't know where he'll be because he missed a few weeks, so it definitely could be lower than that. So I want to give you guys the extra push to trust who you once had hoped, probably, maybe thought, was a stud. Not trust your stud, but trust who you once thought was a stud this week. At a certain point, at least, if you've got him compared over DJ Moore, even, I say. And, of course, that's all only if, for him and JSN, if Geno Smith plays. If not, be prepared. Have a backup option for these Seattle guys, because if Sam Howell is the starter, it's not going to be a whole lot different, or maybe it'll be the exact same as how low I knock these guys down with the Cleveland wide receivers with DTR. And obviously DK Metcalf would not be a love of mine at that point or anything like that. That's going to bring us on to this next tier wide receivers 29 through 35. We've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Darnell Mooney, Calvin Ridley with Mason Rudolph in at quarterback, Jaden Reed, Jameson Williams, Josh Downs, and Keenan Allen. I tell you, no sooner did I finish up with these wide receiver rankings than I had to go back and adjust the quarterbacks and then adjust my wide receiver rankings again, because the announcements were flowing in while I was tidying up and getting ready to film earlier in the day. So for Marvin Harrison Jr., he's going up against the Carolina Panthers this week. Technically, only an above-average matchup, nothing fantastic, despite not having a good secondary, and that is because teams can just run all over them. And believe me, I am excited about my James Conner stock in this game. But I do have a really good gut feeling about Marvin Harrison Jr. in, once again, a matchup against a poor secondary. This is a week where maybe Arizona could focus on trying to get him going. And I just got that good gut feeling for Marvin Harrison Jr. So I'm somebody who I would take a risk on throwing him out there this week, despite the season that he's had, compared to, especially to where some of y'all drafted him, you crazy nuts. And that's going to bring us on to Calvin Ridley as well. And I pretty much spoiled the reason, part of what I'm talking about here. Having Mason Rudolph, I think, is actually probably a better thing for Calvin Ridley, based on the fact that Will Levis, we have, 3 weeks in a row now, I've been very excited about Will Levis due to the matchups. Another one where we should be pretty excited about it against Indianapolis, but he just really hasn't come through in the way that we've been hoping and expecting he might, and I think a lot of that is because Will Levis has just failed to get the ball into his hands. Now, I'm not going to be too high up on him, because I think we still need to be cautious with how high we rank him. The experts have him all the way up at 24th. I think that's a little bit too high for a guy who's been the wide receiver 46 on the season at this point, with these recent disappointing weeks not helping that number at all. So, you can see that's quite a bit higher than what his performance level has been, and I don't think Rudolph is that much of an improvement over Will Levis. In fact, earlier in the season when I looked at it, Will Levis and him targeted at that point in time Calvin Ridley about the same amount of time. Rudolph probably now averages higher because of recent weeks and Will Levis's inability to get him the ball, but there we go. That's going to bring us on to maybe the last tier. Yes, the last tier of these wide receiver rankings, from wide receiver 36 all the way to 48, kind of the hodgepodge here. We're out of the area where I'm feeling too comfortable on things. We got Adam Thielen, followed by DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, Deebo Samuel, Quentin Johnston, Nick Westbrook, Akine, Rashad Bateman, Romeo Doubs, Jalen Coker, Roma Dunze, Michael Pittman Jr., Tank Dell, and Christian Watson to wrap this tier up. And for me, Adam Thielen versus Jalen Coker there, both Carolina receivers. Why am I higher on Adam Thielen than Jalen Coker? Jalen Coker just had a bigger week than Adam Thielen in fantasy, with the first game all season where the two played together. Well, I was on top of that, by the way, last week. I prevented, hopefully, plenty of you from playing Adam Thielen. Hopefully recommended somebody that was better than Adam Thielen's performance last week, because of the return of Jalen Coker. Now, that being said, although that worked out, I don't know that Jalen Coker is better than Adam Thielen, and I think they're both a little bit maybe lower, because there is some sort of, Bryce Young feels pretty, pretty good about both of them. I think he evenly targeted them throughout the game. But what has made this final decision here is how things have went. So first of all, Xavier Legette gets injured during that game. So we know that Jalen Coker and Adam Thielen are for sure going to be both on the field, and that seems to be what was happening anyways. I had suspected that maybe Adam Thielen would move out into the David Moore role. It was actually Jalen Coker that seems to have, for the most part, moved out into the David Moore role. Adam Thielen, for the most part, stayed in the slot. Thielen this was the least amount of time he spent in the slot all season. Jalen Coker did come down and play in the slot at times throughout the game, but still, mostly they're keeping Adam Thielen in the slot, Jalen Coker taking over that David Moore role, or the Xavier Legette role, sorry. I don't actually know which. Maybe they put David Moore into that Xavier Legette role, and then Jalen Coker taking the David Moore, whatever. Jalen Coker now playing out wide more is the main point. He pretty much split time. About 50% of his snaps were out wide, 50% in the slot. And that is not as optimal as Adam Thielen's 75-ish% time in the slot. I do think that Bryce Young has a tendency to throw to that slot receiver more. It's an easier target, makes a lot of sense than the other way. So I have more faith in Adam Thielen's target share remaining higher than Jalen Coker's. And, part of what Jalen Coker did last week was due to one big play, which you can't rely on either. Other than that, guys who I do not have ranked in my top 90-ish wide receivers this week right now are Chris Olave, of course not, with Derek Carr not coming back, quite potentially. I don't think we see Chris Olave come back. George Pickens, Jalen Waddle, and Xavier Legette are also currently not being ranked, could by the end of the week, so we'll see. Thank you very much. Tonight, running backs video comes out tomorrow morning. Quarterbacks and tight ends videos come out, so check those out. Peace out.